Meet the young Jarl Useless Fodder, barely a man but already dreaming of securing rich and fertile lands for the FoddSquad. Knowing that in order to do so he'll need to surround himself with the best of warriors and advisors, he sets everyone, including himself, off to find suitable spouses. The sounds of wedding bells were replaced with the sounds of men marching off to war, as the young Jarl knew he'd need to grow his influence in order to lead a Scandinavian exodus. During the siege of Galdi he would fall ill, but he still marched off with the men to the siege of Prendheimer and recovered shortly thereafter. With the army resting after a successful campaign, Jarl Useless Fodder sets off on a hunt to continue proving his prowess to his fellow Northmen. After returning from the hunt, the warbands were summoned for the conquests of Meri and Furdafilki. A tactical misstep leads to a loss in Meri, but it was quickly remedied, and then the young Jarl receives word from home. Chiefess Portis was bearing his child. Marching home expecting to greet his firstborn, Useless Fodder would instead find heartbreak. Rather than dealing with his emotions like a man, he promptly rallied his troops and headed out on his third campaign in 2 years. Making quick work of both Sagen and Hordaland, the Jarl found time to sneak home and work on producing an heir, and found as much success in the bedroom as he had on the battlefield. Then, back to the front to wrap up the siege of Rogaland. Now, all that was left to be done was securing the funds for ships and supplies. To do this, the armies wouldn't even stand down, but instead shifted straight into raid mode, no longer looking to bring fellow warriors into the fold. The goal now was to secure as much wealth as could be extracted from the lands. What followed was years of raiding. Almost no one was capable of getting in the way of the FoddSquad, and while raiding in the Baltic states, word came from Portis of the birth of the heir to the squad, young Jarl Useless Fodderson. Feeling assured that his men had secured the necessary funds, everyone prepared to return home and begin final preparations. Not wanting to spend any more winters than necessary in the frigid north, Jarl Useless Fodder loads the entire squad onto ships in November of 879 and sets out to make their fortune. Rather than heading for the shores of the Anglo-Saxons, which were already thick with the sons of Ragnar, the FoddSquad took a more southerly route out of the North Sea, sailing through a rather narrow strait before heading upriver into the heart of Francia. The Frankish troops were quickly overwhelmed around their mid-river stronghold, and the squad began securing the surrounding strongholds as well. In the midst of this conquest, Portis would give birth to a second son, who would be known as Ossi, who would only know life in the fertile lands of Francia. The Norse and Frankish troops would clash once again near the stronghold of Mau, where once again the Franks were soundly defeated, and in the summer of 881, King Louis II would capitulate, surrendering a sizable tract of land. To the locals, the land would always be known as Valois, but to the conquerors, it would be known simply as FoddSquad HQ. A second pair of sons would be born mere months apart, the older being named Waksu and the younger named Polygian. After 16 years of near constant fighting, Useless Fodder had gained a reputation as one of the fiercest warriors, a true berserker. Even the toughest of warriors can be a good father though, and nothing passes the winter days like a good snowball fight with young Ossi. The winter months over, the troops set back on the march. Not to conquer, but to extract a new fortune from the unsuspecting Franks, who had only heard the hushed tales of the conquest of Valois. Seeking to expand their holdings to the other side of the narrow strait, the warriors loaded back onto their ships and set sail for the lands of Alfred of Wessex in 885. For all their successes in both the north and Francia, the FoddSquad had met their match in the Anglo-Saxons and were resoundingly defeated in multiple battles across Wessex and Mercia. Hoping to salvage the effort, Durin was betrothed to a young daughter of Sigurd Snake in the Eye to secure an alliance. Unfortunately, this didn't help at all, and in 887 the squad marched home, heads hung low. After reaching manhood, Durin left FoddSquad HQ for Mikkelgard to make a name for himself as a warrior, and Jarl Useless Fodder could not have been more proud. Sensing opportunity to the west of HQ, the troops were raised once again and headed off to secure coastal lands and whatever wealth could be extracted from them. Not wanting to repeat the mistakes of the Wessex and Mercian campaign, Useless Fodder took no chances in Brittany and won in just more than a year. Coming of age in 896, Ossi was married to a strong but low-born Norse woman, Grima, and the newlyweds were granted the county of Sable to call their home.
That's my boy! No, my boy! Father, help!
With sons coming of age and needing lands of their own, in 989 the squad declared war on what was left of the Briton lords. The Britons mounted a cursory defense, but like the Franks before them, they had no idea what was coming. Before the campaign would complete, Waksu would come of age, taking a comely Norse woman to wife, and they would settle in the county of Penthir. Hot on his heels was Polygian, who had settled in Amiens, and and like his barely older brother, married a comely Norse woman. To the surprise of everyone, Durin returned from Micklegard just in time for the wedding. Spring of 899 would see the Britons surrender the last of their lands to the Squad. Chieftess Portis, mother of several young squad mates and true companion to the Jarl, would pass on in 904. But in 907, Useless Fodder would find love again with a lowborn Frankish woman. After spending most of the first decade of the 10th century in minor border skirmishes and raiding, in the summer of 909, Jarl Fodder, not wanting the FoddSquad to divide into factions on his death, elevated himself to the title of king. Not wanting his younger sons to feel slighted, the king began elevating the princes from their mere county holdings to full-blown jarldoms of their own. Prince Waxu receiving the Duchy of Champagne, Prince Polly receiving the Duchy of Anjou, and Prince Ozzy would lead the Duchy of Brittany. Meanwhile, a river clan of Northmen had laid claim to the coastal lands north of Squad HQ that Useless Fodder had been eyeing ever since landing. With his sons properly landed, the time to strike was early summer of 910. Somehow the two armies completely missed each other on the march and ended up laying simultaneous siege to each other's capitals. Not wanting to risk the fall of Paris, the king would leave a small band of warriors to continue claiming coastal lands while marching the rest of the troops home to deal with the counter-invasion. Prince Ossi would turn the tides during the fights surrounding Paris, doing serious damage to the enemy champions. After a series of hopeless counterattacks, in the summer of 912, the Jarldom of Flanders was integrated into FoddSquad HQ. By 913, Prince Ossi had lost an eye, but had a solid handle on his Duchy of Brittany. Meanwhile, Prince Waxu was losing a war he hadn't bothered to ask his father's help with, but otherwise he was doing alright. Prince Polly has managed to only have daughters, and 4 of them at that. To the surprise of none of his brothers, he picked up a drinking problem. The Christians would begin their first crusade in 915, and rather than looking to the distant shores of the Mediterranean Sea, their attention is firmly on the fledgling Danelaw. As a matter of Norse pride, the king rallied his troops and headed across the strait. Landing in Durham, the army made their way to Lancashire, hoping to catch a small band unawares for an easy start to the war. This worked well, and they turned their attention towards a larger force sieging the county of Dunbar. The battle was a rousing success, but in the feast to come, King Useless Fodder raised his last cup of mead before passing on to Valhalla. Renowned warrior Durin quickly assumes the mantle of king to continue the war effort. Tune in next time to find out how it goes.